Welcome back to section 3.1. We are continuing here, and now we're going to be talking about polynomials, and specifically how to add, subtract, and multiply polynomials. So starting off with adding and subtracting polynomials, when we are going to add or subtract them, we're basically combining our like terms together. Right? So combine like terms. Well, what do I mean by like terms? Well, like terms are terms that have the same variable and the same exponent. So if we had something like x squared and 2x squared, those would be like terms. But if I had something like x squared and 2x, those are not like terms. Although they have the same variable, they don't have the same exponent on the variable. The exponent on this one would just be to the first power. So those are not like terms. All right, let's come down here and do that. So we have 2x squared minus 4 plus x squared plus 6x minus 2. So I can see that I have a 2x squared and an x squared. And there's really like an invisible 1 in front of that, so we want to remember that. So 2x squared plus 1x squared is going to give me 3x squared. All right, now if we're writing this in descending order, we want to look for x's next. Well, this one doesn't have an x term, but the second one does here, right? We've got a 6x. So there's nothing to add with it, but it still needs to be part of our answer. And then lastly, we can look at negative 4 plus a negative 2 will give us a negative 6. And so now I have all my like terms together, so that is the answer. Okay, let's take a look at this problem 3. I can see that I have a negative here because these are being subtracted this time. But notice that it's saying subtract all 3 of these terms. It's not just that 3x squared that needs to be subtracted. So one way that you can look at this to make sure you don't make a mistake with it is think about how this is like a negative 1, and I need to distribute that negative 1 to everybody, right? Multiply each part by negative 1, which is just going to change the signs of each of those, which is what we need to have happen, right? Because if I subtract a positive 3x, that's just minus x. But if I subtract a negative 4, that's going to be a positive 4. Okay, so let's think of, so this is not going to change. Let me write it down on this next line. And now when I distribute this through, I have a negative 3x squared. Negative 1 times 2x is going to give me a negative 2x. And negative 1 times negative 4 is going to give me positive 4. All right, now that everything is, we got that distributed through, we can now combine our like terms together. So I've got a 2x squared minus 3x squared, which will give us a negative 1x squared, or if you just write it as negative x squared, that's perfectly fine. Now let's look for our x terms. I've got negative 4x minus 2. It's going to give us negative 6x. And now I have the constant term, but 4 plus 4 gives me 8. All right, and there I have my answer. I've combined all those like terms together after I distributed that negative through. Okay, let's go ahead and do problem 4 as well. Notice again, this is a subtract problem, so you've got to watch that closely, right? If it starts off as an add problem or a subtract. So since it's subtract, again, I want to distribute that negative 1 through, or change all the signs of that second one. So the first one, this first polynomial is going to stay the same. But the second one, when I distribute the negative 1 through, I'm going to have negative 4x to the 5th minus 4x to the second, and then plus 7. And now we're ready to combine our like terms together. So negative x to the fifth minus 4x to the fifth. Notice we've got an x to the fifth and an x to the fifth. That's why we can combine those together. Negative 8 minus 4 is negative 12. X to the fifth. Now let's combine our x squared terms together. So I've got x squared and I've got negative 4x squared. So 1 minus 4 gives me negative 3, and then I keep that x squared. Those had to be the same to add them together, so I got to keep that the same. All right, now notice there in the first polynomial we have a 10x, but there's no x that we had in that second polynomial there to combine with it. So there's no term to combine there, but I do need to make sure it's part of my answer, so plus 10x. And similarly, I have a plus 7, but there's nothing else to combine it with. So plus 7. And now I have my answer. Okay, for problem number 5, I want you to try this on your own. So go ahead and work through this one. Notice it's a subtract problem, so be careful with that. And then come back. So go ahead and pause your video now. And when you come back, look and see how you did. All right, see how you did on this one. So I distributed that negative 1 through, and then combined my like terms, and I got 5y to the third minus y squared. I could write it as minus 1y squared, but I don't need that one, plus 8y plus 11. Now, I like to put my answers in descending order. And remember, that means that the largest exponent is first, and then you go down to the next exponent, and so on. But it's not wrong on this. Like if I would have written plus 11 and then plus 8y, that still would be a correct answer unless it said specifically to put it in descending order. And it's nice having it in descending order because it just keeps things more organized for things that you're going to be doing later on in math. I hope that was helpful for you.